Yeah, go for it, Isabel.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, so thanks everyone for joining today's webinar. Sorry about some of the technical issues, which is always a fun part of working online. So today's webinar, it's the closing webinar of the PyroLife series, the Cycle 1 Living with Fire. And it's actually also the opening to the PyroLife course, which is starting today, and it's on understanding fire, the human dimensions and planning. And this is happening online and later on also in person throughout the coming few weeks. So today's topic is Indigenous fire management. And we are welcoming Professor Bibiana Bilbao from the Universidad Simón Bolívar from Venezuela. And she will be talking about the lessons and challenges for the construction of a new paradigm of fire management with an intercultural vision. So before I introduce Bibiana a bit more in depth and give the floor to her, I would like to cover some housekeeping. So today's webinar, it's recorded, and later on we'll share the link to the recording on the PyroLife website and on our YouTube channel. And also, as every webinar, we have one early stage researcher writing a summary. This month, Kathleen will do this. Thank you, Kathleen. And this summary we will also share it with you, plus it can be found on the PyroLife website. Then, if you're talking about the webinar on social media, it would be great if you use the official hashtag, which is PyroLife webinars. And well, today's presentation from Bibiana will be around 40 minutes. And we made sure that there's time at the end of the presentation for all of your questions. So I really encourage everyone to take the opportunity and learn more from her today. So all of your questions and comments, you can put them in the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your Zoom window. And please do this throughout the presentation, because that way we have everything lined up for the Q&A session after Bibiana's presentation. Also, because a lot of people are listening from different places across the globe, feel free to add any of your questions and comments in the language you're most comfortable with, and we will answer them back in English. And also, sometimes there's not enough time to address all of the questions. So Bibiana, she kindly offered that she could also answer them in written, and this we can share later on also with everyone. Just to introduce myself a bit, because I'm today's webinar moderator, I'm Isabel Ottolini. I'm based at the Open University of Catalonia in Spain, and my research within PyroLife focuses on community-based wildfire communication. And for this, I'm exploring the role it has in societal transformation towards living with fire. And I'm really honored to introduce today's speaker, the Professor Bibiana Bilbao. As I mentioned, she works at the Universidad Simón Bolívar in Venezuela, and there she's a professor at the Department of Environmental Studies. She's also co-founder of the Intercultural and Participatory Fire Management Network, and is currently involved in the EU Horizon 2020 project called Landmark. For this, she's a regional case study leader for South America, and the case study, it's about indigenous fire management as a land use-based mitigation technology. In general, her work evolves around the ecological and human dimensions of fire management, and this is often with indigenous peoples in tropical ecosystems. Particularly in the Venezuela context, it's with the Bemon indigenous peoples, which she will talk about more today. And her work is very much aimed at developing more effective, more socially just and culturally sensitive policies for both intercultural and participatory governance of integrated fire management, both in Venezuela and beyond. So Bibiana, thanks so much for joining us today. And without further delay, I will hand the session over to you. So I will stop sharing my screen. And please go ahead to share your screen whenever you're ready.
Thank you very much. I'm going to sorry. Well, thank you very much. It's a great honor to speak before you today. Congratulations on this fantastic and valuable PhD training initiative of the PyroLife project for the next generation of fire scientists. Thank you very much for this invitation. Well, human evolution was associated to fire management. It is believed that the evolution of Homo erectus has been driven by the ability to cook 1,000,000 years ago. The domestication of fire led to the development of different activities such as agriculture, hunting, the establishment of population centers. Also, humans have used fire for thousands of years and influenced ecosystem and fire regimes in their inhabited areas. There are evidences that in the pre-Columbian America, fire enabled the domestication of plants and forests. Especially, this is very important, the production of the terra preta do indio in the Amazon basin. This was very important for agricultural activities in tropical areas because of the nutrient-poor and heavily washed soils dominant in tropical areas. This was very important to create light environment for light and nutrient demanding species like chilies and palms. Fire was important too because of the capacity of selection of fire tolerant and adapted species and change in forest species composition. However, after the arrival of the Europeans in the Americas, some indigenous practices of fire and land use were interrupted and replaced by those brought by the colonizers. But today, Latin America is home to the largest diversity of indigenous peoples in the world, and the population is growing. Today, there are 830 different peoples, with 45 to 60 millions of inhabitants in 400 million of hectares. In some countries like Bolivia, indigenous people represent almost 50% of total population. There is a strong link between indigenous land management and environment protections. There are stronger evidences that these lands have higher biodiversity, reduced rates of deforestation and habitat conversion, and reduced greenhouse emissions. This is especially important, the capacity of indigenous land management to store carbon stocks. In one study developed by Walker and collaborators, they show that in the Amazon basin between 2003 and 2016, the indigenous territory were more effective to accumulate or reduce the loss of carbon. This is important because even these differences are remarkable with respect to other protected area, especially in other lands. You can see the huge difference between this territory. It seems that the most effective areas are those that combine indigenous territories with protected areas. The reason of the huge amount of carbon loss at the moment one of the reasons is that because of land uses changes, expansion of the agricultural livestock frontier, and climate change. Mainly because they produce these conditions to mega fires in tropical and Mediterranean system too. This type of mega fire are defined as those fires that are not able to manage or to control or extinguish under the present continuous of and resources for combating them, and only they are stopped when the fuel or weather conditions change. In response of this to this situation, to these catastrophic fires, most countries adopted zero fire policies intended to exclude and control virtually any fires. However, although this is effort, the results are not were not very effective. Instead, you can see that there is an increase in the number and extension and severity of wildfires in South America, even in the protected areas. So, a new fire governance based on adaptation measures is urgently needed to avoid a state of no return of affected natural and rural areas in the region, and to reduce the larger climatic migrations, morbidity, and economical losses caused by catastrophic fires. But so, what can be the alternative be? Is it possible to avoid catastrophic wildfires under climatic change conditions where fire-dependent ecosystem and fire-sensitive ecosystem coexist? Can fire be managed in coexistence with local population who rely on it for subsistence practices? Today, I would like to share with you the experiences from Canaima National Park in Venezuela. Canaima National Park is located in the extreme southeast of Venezuela, in the limit with Guyana and Brazil. It has an extension of 30,000 square kilometers and represents one of the largest protected areas in South America. It comprehends the Caroni River Basin, which generates 80% of the total hydroelectrical energy in the country. Although the dominant vegetation type is tropical humid forest, the dominant landscape is represented by a mosaic of savanna and forest ecosystem. Canaima National Park was declared UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994 because of its singular landscape, diversity, and singular phytogeography and geology characteristics. It is located in the central of Guayana Shield, one of the most ancient territories in the world, with 3,000 million of years. This is it has also a high value, cultural value, the park, because the natural inhabitants are the Amerindians Pemon, which belongs to the Caribbean family, and they present three different groups: Arecuna, Camaracoto, and Taurepam. These communities showed a high increase in inhabitants, and they went from 19,000 inhabitants in 1982 to 33,000 inhabitants in 2010. So the Canaima National Park comprises the national park with the largest number of inhabitants in Venezuela. The use of fire for shifting agriculture, conucos, and hunting is a common practice by Pemon indigenous people and constitutes the main subsistence activities. This type of fires that they are controlled in the case of Sweden agriculture, they select an area that range between half an hectare to 1 hectare, and this type of fire promotes the fertilization on soils and the regrow important species and crops. The hunting activities are usually done in the savanna forest transition. They use the fire to trap the prey and to hunt them, and the fire is also important for fishing activities in the forest, savanna, and river transition. However, the policy of the park administration and the electrical company, they were concerned about the occurrence of high number of fire. So they developed from 1982 a program to combat extinguish any type of fire, in order to protect the basin, the Caroni River basin, and the park. However, in spite of carrying out enormous fire suppression efforts, only 13% of total fires are effectively extinguished. So in 1999, I was invited by hydrological company to study the fire behavior and impact on vegetation in order to increase the effectivity of fire management in the region. So we developed a long-term fire experiment in a transition of savanna forest. In savanna, the occurrence of fire is higher in savanna areas. 70% of total fire start in savanna area. So we established 21 plots of half an hectare each one in order to reproduce the natural behavior of fire. In total, we did 31 experimental fires. But we, as ecologists, we know, our team know how to develop an experiment, but we didn't know how to make fires. So we invited the community, the Pemon people, to help us during the time of designing and to do the fires, and they decided the moment and the different strategy. We developed different treatments doing fires in different times of the dry season and in different years. Well, I'm going to share some of the most relevant results. We measure in general the biomass accumulation, the vegetation composition, the soil characteristics and nutrients, and emissions of gases to the atmosphere. In these two graphics, I'm going to show what was the impact of the long-term fire experiment on biomass accumulation and in the proportion of dead to green biomass, the dead-green ratio. Three important results we obtained with this experiment. The first of it is that we can have at the same time different fire histories of different biomass accumulation in different plots with different treatments and years since last fires. So we have a great heterogeneity of different biomass accumulation. The second result was that it's necessary a minimum of biomass to start a fire or to allow the spread of fire. In this case was 600 grams per square meter. And the third, and maybe the most important result, that the years since last fire with fire exclusion, we have a higher accumulation of biomass. And the quality of the biomass, the proportion of dead biomass increase with respect to the last years after last burn. What's the meaning of these results? That with the policy of fire exclusion, we obtain an increase of fuel load and especially of dead fuel. So fire suppression leads to an increase in dry fuel loading, predisposing to high intensity of fires. This situation is very important because it indicated that a change on the fire policy was necessary because the huge increase of fuel accumulation. So the policy was increasing the vulnerability of the system to more intense and severe wildfires. The other important conclusion that the savanna vegetation could support the creation of mosaic of patches with different fire stories that could be used as fire walls to stop the advance of wildfires. And this technique imitates ancient practice employed by centuries by the Pemon people through cooperative burning savannas. And they make this mosaic in order to avoid the spread of wildfires, and they stop the wildfire and protect the forest that is the main source of their agricultural activities, hunting and collection of other results. So our scientific knowledge support ancestral knowledge of Pemon and open possibilities for a new approach for fire management in the Canaima National Park, where traditional fire approach is to fight fire with fire. We also try to search what the other fire uses, for example, for the Pemon shifting cultivation practice in Canaima National Park. We developed different studies in different sections of the park, and we discovered very interesting results. For example, there are a very sophisticated technique to use the fire to improve the quality of the soils, and also we found a high diversity of different crops that are disposed in the conucos, that is the area of cultivation practices, depending of the quality of the nutrient in soils. The other important effect is fire increase the pH of the soil, because they are really very acid and there is a high aluminum concentration. The fire has the capacity to increase the pH and reduce the aluminum toxicity. And the main cultivation crop is the yucca, Manioc esculenta, and they have different types. The yucca are sown in the center of the conucos, where there is the higher accumulation of charcoal that promote more fertile soils. During this process, we detected that it was a great concern of the indigenous community. They are feeling they are losing their culture. They are losing the knowledge about how to manage the fire and other ancient practice. And the elders are the depositary of this knowledge. But there is, because it's a culture of oral transmission of the knowledge, the transculturation process are avoiding this contact between elders and younger. So we decided to promote and to help the capacity building of young researchers, indigenous researchers, in order to conduct interviews with grandparents and to produce a book about ancestral Pemon indigenous knowledge, in order to promote the revitalization of indigenous knowledge inside the community. Until now, we have more than 20 national and international action research projects with indigenous peoples' participation implemented. It's important that we made to mention that we made efforts towards a legitimate and sustainable environmental farm management policy with an action research approach that promotes the multi-sectorial interculturality and participatory process basis at knowledge exchange with different actors, where any type of knowledge are really important and valuable. So we main focus was to integrate different type of knowledges and actions between researchers, governmental agencies, and Pemon indigenous community to legitimate an intercultural and participatory farm management in Canaima National Park. And until now, we have several advances. We have higher dialogue between indigenous communities, scientists, and institutions, greater respect and valorization for indigenous knowledge by scientists and institutions, greater confidence and trust in institutions by indigenous peoples, commitment by institutions to include indigenous knowledge and participation within farm management plans. And most important things, we are in the process of paradigm change in farm management by public institutions, promoting from firefighting and suppression to integrated and participatory farm management. Now we are in the process to create a new law in all the countries, translating all these experiences to national level. In 2015, we have a meeting in Canaima National Park that met 60 different indigenous people, different institutions from Brazil, Guyana, and Venezuela, in order to create a new paradigm of farm management in the region. I'm going to share some important points of the declaration. The main focus was to the integration. The farm management must be integrated into the management of the territories in which indigenous people live and make their livelihoods, uses ancestral, traditional, and adaptive indigenous farm knowledge supported by scientific, academic, and institutional partners. This included a promotion of empowerment of indigenous communities and their active participation in decision making. I'm going to finish this presentation sharing with you a part of the speech of Valeriano Constantin, President of the Council Elders and natural leader of Cabanache Indigenous Community for more than 20 years. During a workshop, an intercultural workshop, designing actions plans on climate change, integrating local indigenous perspective with academia and institutions in Canaima National Park. In IBIC, that was the most important center of research in Venezuela. Look, son, do not go ahead of me. Why did the old wise men say that? Because if on the journey one goes ahead, you are more likely to trip up. There could be an animal, there could be a snake or a spider that bites you. But don't go behind me either. If you do, you won't be able to see what I am seeing as I am in front of you. So one has to be very careful. That is why our grandparents said that we must walk together hand in hand. In that way, we both can see what is ahead and we won't trip up. This is my advice to the institutions, academy, and government. Let's all hold on to grab each other to walk together so no one trips up. Wakiperman, gracias, thank you.
Thank you, Bibiana, for your great presentation. And yeah, also on behalf of everyone who's listening, just want to thank you for sharing your experience, your knowledge today. And it's really great to learn from you, like about the whole context in Latin America, because we've been hearing from speakers from Australia and from North America and Europe, but South or Latin America was still something we were very much looking forward to hearing from. And it's great to see that, yeah, on one hand, that bridging scientific, well, or Western scientific research with more indigenous knowledge systems, and how this can actually lead to real policy changes, and the declaration you mentioned. Let me see if there are any questions. So yes, Kathleen, she's mentioning a question, and also for all the other participants, feel free to add any questions if you have any. So Kathleen, she's mentioning that she would love to learn more about the interviews conducted between the young Indigenous researchers and the elder knowledge holders. What were the reflections of the youth and the elders after this process? And has this promoted more community knowledge exchange? And also, is this material available to people in the Pemon language, so not just in Spanish or in any written format?
Oh, thank you. This is a very important question. It was very interesting because this the possibility to do the interviews and a book that recorded the main knowledge of the elders was accepted by the community, and they were very excited. They discussed along with the 55 different elders of different communities in the same territory, discussing in their own language, in Pemon language, about the benefits and the risk about to do this book. At the end, they asked us to promote, to help them to do the book. But the process was, each step was consulted with the community, especially with the elders council. And they selected what young researchers were going to do the activity. They were selected by them. And they expressed themselves, the young researchers, that for them was a very exciting experiences, because of course the question were designed between we helped them to define the question, but at the end they decided how and the way, the place, which who elders were going to participate. And for them, the young researchers said that at the beginning it was very difficult to understand the elders, because of course there is an evolution of the language, and because they attend to school, and now the young people, they are losing some words and expressions. So for them it was a real challenge to learn this, relearn the language and the contact with the elders. And for example, in Gran Sabana we have bilingual school. So the teacher teach in Spanish and in Pemon, but unfortunately they teach in Pemon the Western culture, or the criollos culture. So they decided that it was a very good idea to take the elders to the school to teach the young people, because now the elders are in the conucos, far away from the main towns. So they stopped the oral transmission between elders and younger people. So this initiative was very important, not only to recompile or to store this knowledge. This promotes the communication between different generations. So it was a very complicated and long process, but we are very happy the results of this initiative.
Thank you. That's so interesting to hear about, and it's also this intergenerational knowledge exchange. It's so important, as well as keeping the language alive, right? I think many of us can relate to that. That certain concepts or phrases or meanings they get lost, and it's part of the cultural heritage around fire. And just amazing to hear about your experience, and also the whole participatory approach, how everything evolved together with the communities, how they led the process. So thanks for answering the question. The next question we have, it's from Peter Moore from the FAO. And he says, thank you for this fantastic recount. And he was wondering how can we access the materials, the methods and the analysis? Because there are probably so many places where similar ideas might be valid, but the examples and the stories are missing.
Sorry, do you mean the access of the material of resource?
Yes, I think like the materials and also the methods that were used for the research process.
Excellent. Well, it's also a very important question, because how transmit this experience? Okay, we produce, because, well, I am in the academic world, so we produce some papers, publish some articles related with this experience, not only from the experimental studies or the different knowledge we learn from this project, but also for me, these experiences change my own paradigm as a scientist, as an academic, no? Because what is the value of our knowledge as scientists? What we need to learn? In my experience, I learn a lot, maybe more than in the formal academic in terms of fire, more than the academic formation. So we realize that it's a huge amount of knowledge is usually invisible to the people that make decisions, or the people that administrate the park or define the policies for conservation. So we together with other colleagues from COBRA Collective, that there is a social enterprise that promotes the solution by home communities, we decided to use video participatory techniques to give voice to these people that usually don't have the opportunity to share or to express their concerns. So we need some of them videos are published, but we are now to organize to be more to give more publicity to this type of video, to share not only with the people that make decisions, but we also, that is very useful to share with other indigenous community that are suffering the same problems, no? And we discovered that this is a very important tool for mitigation and adaptive actions to climate change. So now we are trying to create to support to make reports to help the people that make decisions, the responsible of policymakers. This is not scientific, but there are reports for recommendations about our experiences. But of course, we can share with the people interested some of these results.
Yes, it would be actually great to see some of these results, and maybe you can share it with us so we can put it in the PyroLife, the blog summary of the session. That way people can access it easily. And it's also fascinating to hear about this method of video participatory methods. It's a great way of collecting data and also as a reflection tool for people, and as you also mentioned, to share it with other communities facing these challenges. So that's great to hear about. Let me see if there are any other questions. Otherwise, yeah. In the meanwhile, I have another question, which is, yeah, I'm really interested in how this integration of indigenous knowledge, how does it work then into policy? Like, are there any obstacles that you found presenting this indigenous knowledge? Are there people who do not accept it, or are there people who are very much in favor of it? And how do you manage these tensions between the different groups? Also, like, yeah, what do people consider as valid knowledge?
Yes. Well, thank you for this question. Yes, maybe it's one of the most challenges activities that we have, because you know, the dominant policy is, well, historically was firefighting and suppression. Now we are in the process in Latin America to adopt a new vision about integrated fire management. I think this is a very important progress, because at least they recognize the good face of fire, no? Because usually the fire, especially for people that make decisions on define policies, always in the media, also you have the catastrophic result of mega fires, always the bad face of fires. So it was because the countries adopted the firefighting, not the reactive actions to fire occurrence. For most of the people, even today, although they assume fire integrated management, the paradigm is to buy more equipment, invest in more resources to combat fire. So it's a very strong work to say that the necessity to be more proactive, to include the local knowledge, no? Because the problem is because of the bad perception of fires. Sometimes the local people are considered the guilties. They are the producers. It's very complex, because they, for example, the Pemon, because the plural is Pemones. The name for the you know, the park administration word quemones, that in Spanish the burners, because okay, they use the fire, but the good fire, no? So this is the reason that the scientist has the responsibility to translate the message. It's a very socio-ecological problem, so we need to translate this type of knowledge, no? And with numbers to quantify the benefits of this type of management to the people that make decisions. The risk that we are facing today is it's very important to do the monitoring the fire behavior, because it's a way to detect where are the more vulnerable areas, to detect the causes of fire. But sometimes we simplify the results. And the promotion of this new powerful technique, of remote sensing techniques, there is a risk to oversimplify the problem. Not again, we are trying to say, oh, we need to remove the fire because the fire, we detect the fire promotes damage. No, so we need to create a new interface and between different actors. This is, I think, this is the only solution. The problem is even in, for example, in the United States, they invest $5 billion each year to combat fires. For example, last mega fire in California last year, they invested $2 billion. But the only way to stop this fire, it was because of the weather and the fuels. And it caused, this mega fire causes thousands of problems, and houses damaged, deaths, etc. So this is for me, it's very interesting to see that we need to change the paradigm. Especially in our countries, we don't have enough money to invest in these techniques. So if we are able to create intercultural platforms where we are able to exchange different point of view, perspectives and solutions, I think we are able to create an effective new paradigm. You saw, for example, that there are prescribed burns that imitates this indigenous fire management, but it's very important to include the communities, local community, in the implementation of this policy.
Thank you for your answer, and it's really interesting to hear from you. I believe there's much to also learn for Europe, because also here the default paradigm is fire suppression still, even though there is now increasingly more awareness that that's not the way to go. It's there are a lot of additional challenges that come from only suppressing fire instead of finding alternative approaches to it. Judith, she's one of our ESRs at Cyprus, and she has a question. She wants to thank you first of all for the insights into the practice of cultural burning, and she would really like to hear a bit more about where do you draw the line between the different types of knowledge, like what is indigenous knowledge and what is scientific knowledge, and also how do you keep those? How do you keep their value? Do you keep them separate in policies, or do you mix them in policies? How do these different knowledge systems interact?
Yes, a very good question too. It's a difficult answer, no, because it's very interesting, this question, because we have a history about the dominant policies were based in scientific and technological knowledge. We have a history of dominance, no? So is one of the solution is how we create these interfaces or platform in an horizontal in an equality environment, no, where every type of knowledge is useful and valuable, no. the experiences we had were very, we started from a very conflictive situation because indigenous people resent, or I am going to try to find a correct word, because in the past they weren't here. It's important to create a trust environment between the different actors. This is very important to create, because to avoid the dominance of one type of knowledge over other. In general, the traditional knowledge were underestimated, no? So again, the role of the scientist is to give the value, to put the benefits, and to get. But we have another risk now, because there are other initiatives, even in Australia. But in Australia has a very interesting and inspirational history about the value of indigenous people. But at the beginning, the value was done to the knowledge, but not necessarily to the participation. So we believe it's important. When I read the document, the Declaration of Indigenous People, the indigenous people, they differentiate three types of knowledge. They say the ancient knowledge, that the legacy of the elder and the ancestor, the traditional knowledge, that because they are modifying their practices, because the environment is changing, the climate is changing. And they say during the meetings that the adaptive knowledge, because of climate change, because of these changes, they need to adopt new knowledge. So this is an important reflection. The knowledge is changing, is evolving. So the only way is to create this rich atmosphere, this exchange. Is the process has to be participatory. Not only learn from indigenous people, is also including them in the process.
Yes, you're very right. And in that sense, probably oftentimes there's this misconception that indigenous knowledge or local knowledge, that it's something fixed and it's something from the past. Well, it's actually very much, embedded within these times and all the new challenges that are emerging. So that's very, very nice to hear your insight about that. I don't think we have any other questions. If anyone still would like to ask something or comment something, please feel free to do so. And otherwise, in the meanwhile, I have one question, actually, I would like to ask you, what, from your experiences, what lessons can we learn and maybe apply in Europe? Because I think there's much for us to learn from you and your experiences.
Yes, well, I have the opportunity. I have some colleagues, and I was doing my sabbatical year in Toledo with Jose Manuel Moreno about he's a great fire ecologist. So I had the opportunity to learn more, and even from Portugal, I was working in some experiments. And one my colleagues and we prepare a report for Rio CC a network that combine the climate change groups for environmental ministries of Ibero-American countries. So I could learn. I could learn about the experiences and concern from my colleagues from, especially from Spain and Portugal. And it's interesting because I focus in indigenous people, but we can translate the same approach to rural or local people. No, it's interesting. You have a rich knowledge of local people, but in fact, one of the main causes of big wildfires today is because of the migration of local people to the cities. No, so now the rural areas are abandoned. In the past, the people used the fires or detect when a fire starts, so you can answer or give actions in a very short time. But because now the field is abandoned, there is nobody that can tell, oh, there is a fire that is started to take actions, no? So the absence of local community in some parts, it seems that is one of the main causes of the big wildfires, no? So now there is a reason that, oh, the local knowledge is important. And I can, it's very interesting that you, even in Pocosta Foundation, you have the interesting initiatives that trying to rescue this, not only the knowledge, but also the practices, no? The people that, pastoralists, for example, that use the fire to increase the food, the biomass for the cattle or another livestock. Even in Portugal, we reported a very interesting initiative that local population are trying to be together because you have the problem about the definition of territory. There are different, very fragmented territory with different owners. But one of the solutions now is the agreement between these owners trying to have a common fire management. It is very interesting because recently I reviewed a paper that said that maybe we have to adopt the term of instead watershed, fireshed, because the problem of the fires that don't recognize frontiers, don't recognize different properties. So we need to define strategies considering the firesheds, no? With all the heterogeneity and diversity, but again, involving local people. I think Europe have a great work to do involving the local people.
Yes, for sure. Involving local people is very important. Recognizing that there's a lot of knowledge and practices that are still alive and that are very much worthwhile to pay attention to and to listen to and to really integrate into more integrated fire management. Yeah, so with this, we've arrived at the end of today's webinar. There are no more questions, and we've been about an hour now with the webinar. So thank you so much, Bibiana, for the great presentation and sharing all your insights. Like, I would love to just continue the talk and learn more from you. There's so much crossovers between European context and Latin America and things we can learn from each other. Also, thank you to all the participants for joining. And the people behind the screens who have made it possible to make this webinar. So we hope that everyone enjoyed the webinar. Please keep out an eye for the recording and the summary blog, which will be shared very soon. And also, if you think that anyone's interested in this topic, please feel free to share the blog, the recording, because I think it's great just to these learning opportunities to share it with us as much people as possible. So with this comes the end of this first PyroLife webinar series, and looking forward to speaking soon again.
Well, thank you. I want to say a big thank you for this initiative. I congratulate you on this PyroLife PhD training. I think it's necessary not only to work with the people that make decisions, but only the new generation of fire ecologists. They have a holistic dimension, a human dimension of the problem. Thank you for the invitation. Good luck in this long process.
Thank you very much. Bye, everyone.